Burt.
Okay, I'll give you, not just me.
I know you're you, but you are a sound guru.
That's right. That's true.
An Oscar-winning sound guru.
I've had that privilege. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, it's very funny. Steve Lee and I were just talking about you the other day.
Oh, really? Okay, sure. Steve's an old friend, right? And he's a fellow, lover of the past of sound.
Yes.
There's not many of us left. We're trying to keep it alive.
Yes, he's working on the Hollywood Sound Museum right now.
Heard, right? Exactly. Yep.
Yes. He comes and does my radio show to talk about it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm sure he would.
My infamy precedes me.
And, I just couldn't resist. That was just the opening of, I chatted with Ben Burt for about 10 minutes or so on the TCM Film Festival red carpet this past April. And, of course, it's not often you get to talk to Oscar-winning sound designers. So I couldn't help but mention our good friend, the incomparable Steve Lee, who is here in studio on Behind the Lens today.
Hello.
So,
good old Ben. Ben's a sweetheart. Yeah, I've known him since I really started professionally. He's great.
I feel sorry for Ben.
Yeah, he does too, actually.
Well, for those of you tuning in, this is Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where every week we go behind the lens and below the line with directors, writers, sound gurus, sound mixers, cinematographers, film editors, actors, you name it. They've all been on the show so far. So, and today
have any of them been on 3 times?
No, Steve, you have the record for 3 times. David, let's see. Writer-director David Spaltro has been on the show twice. Okay. Ned Airbar has been on twice. Michael David Lynch has been on twice. There are a few other people. Jamie Lynn Lippman, wonderful director.
Uh-huh.
She's been on twice.
Okay.
Steve Alaric has been here in person twice.
Okay.
He wants to rival, and he wants to.
Okay. Well, we'll start a race.
He wants to go back and forth.
It's on.
With
the race
you.
is on.
Actually, he were it not for the fact that he is up in Toronto filming right now, he would have been here a couple weeks ago because he is going to be appearing on The Rookie, Nathan Fillion's new show, in an upcoming episode.
Oh, okay.
So he was going to, but because he got hired to be on something else.
I know, right? Work beckons.
So right now, you're in the lead 3 times.
Yes.
But, folks, you want movie reviews, interviews, you can find them all 24/7, all of my stuff 24/7 in print and online around the world. Also, behindthelensonline.net. But every Monday, I am right here on adrenalineradio.com live from 11 to 12, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And today I'm so thrilled to have our good buddy, my good buddy, Steve Lee here.
Hi.
Sound guru is an understatement to talk about Steve. And as Ben mentioned, you truly are. You are celebrating, preserving sound history in Hollywood. And you're doing that with your incredible endeavor, the Hollywood Sound Museum.
Well, it's still sort of in our imaginations, but I am assembling a great amount of wonderful stuff, some of which I'll show you today. But we're working on, it's been like almost, oh my gosh, it's almost 3 years now since the inception.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're still getting all the paperwork done and everything, and we're going to be touring a small exhibit soon, and, I seem to keep repeating myself when I come on your show.
No,
but I think the biggest accomplishments lately has been the things that we're going to feature, the things that we're collecting and storing for this wonderful place once it becomes a reality.
Because, there are so many people for years, everybody talked about, oh my God, Debbie Reynolds costumes need to be in a museum, But
that was very sad.
It takes money to create, and not just money, but manpower and logistics.
She was working on that for years, and then finally she,
had to give up.
Had to liquidate a lot of it, and some of it will pop up in the Academy Museum.
I'm sure.
And some of it, other collections. And that great exhibit that Deborah Nadulman did a couple years ago. Some of the stuff was in there, but it's hard. It's taken a long time.
So now you firsthand, because there are other people out here to talk about. Oh, we should do this kind of museum for Hollywood. We should do that kind of museum for Hollywood. Mm-hmm. A great supporter of all museums for Hollywood is Ruta Lee.
Oh, right.
Ruta
Right.
thinks there should be museums for everything, and one of her saddest things was that Debbie Reynolds never got
Yeah.
her museum because they were such close friends.
I haven't sat down with Ruta. I really need to do that. She's a friend on Facebook, but I don't know her well. But I'll have to make that happen.
I adore Ruta.
Yeah, she seems like a
The
sweetheart.
first time Ruta and I ever met, we're going back into the 80s when Tail of the Cock was at Ventura and Coldwater Canyon in the valley. And that was like one of the big hangouts for the old Western
Oh yeah,
actors.
right.
And I was there with Pat Buttram. Yes, Pat. And,
That voice. Oh my God.
And Pat is the one that he introduced me to Ruta.
Oh wow.
He introduced me.
That's you can't get better than that.
So
That's great.
But I absolutely loved hanging out with all the old Western guys.
Oh, sure.
You know, Jack Elam, Dub Taylor.
Yeah.
And Jack and Dub, they both taught me how to play liar's poker at the Beverly Garland's Howard Johnson's bar, no less.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that.
I
must
go
have been...
way back.
Oh, that's wild. That's great. That's
but
funny.
you know, getting back to this whole idea
Yes.
of museum.
Yes.
You know, and where can people actually go right now to find out more about the museum before we start going in
Well,
depth?
they can go to the Facebook page. They can go to the website, which is still sort of it's a link to our GoFundMe page, which we're still collecting donations if anyone wants to give, which is HollywoodSoundMuseum.org. But the Facebook page is a great place to learn sort of weekly information on what we're acquiring. We're going to make a big announcement here, and I'll have more details on the Facebook page about what I've talked about.
Yes, Steve has been taunting everyone, including me,
Well, this is
for
something,
over a month
this
because
is some-
this is an arduous process.
This is a big one because I had been talking about this one internally for like 2 years, and just last week I went and did the final work to acquire it for the museum. So it's quite a story, but we'll get to that soon.
But, you know, how has your approach been? Because you mentioned paperwork, and that's, you know, creating a 501c3.
Yes.
All of this stuff is...
I have help. Lisa Udall, who called in on
Right.
one of the last shows,
Yeah.
she's been handling a lot of our nonprofit paperwork and filings and all that, because my head would just explode if I were acquiring things and doing that and talking to lawyers and all that sort of thing. So she's been a blessing to help get all that done. And she's working diligently to make it happen. And she has the sound background too, since she was married to David Udall.
Mm-hmm.
He's a brilliant sound editor who passed away a year ago. And so she knows the business and she knows the process, and so she can help on that end too. So it's a great combination of someone for the team. So she's on our board and working hard to help us make this a reality.
But now, while she's doing the paperwork part, there's another part called legwork.
Yeah, that's me. I'm hitting the streets and doing the archaeology and tracking things down and securing the pieces that will be on display and tapes that we're going to digitize and yeah.
You know, I'm curious, how hard is it? Because you have spent so many years in the sound industry, so you know people, you are connected, you know the history of sound. So how hard is the archaeological part of tracking things down and finding it?
Well, it can be very difficult, especially when the trail goes cold. You know, if I'm trying to track down something that I know, you know, where it is generally, but I have to like go through, you know, paperwork and legal channels and all that. It can be fairly straightforward, but take a long time. Sometimes we have nothing to go on. We just know a studio, we have a film name, we have this, you know, and you know, hope that it's somewhere. It depends. It's different every time. I remember when I don't know if I told the story. I'm at the point, boys and girls, where I've been on the show so many times I don't remember which stories I've told and which ones I haven't. So forgive me if I've repeated myself. There was a moment where I was at Paramount in the library, and there was a woman named Maureen O'Connell, great person. She was wonderful, and she helped me uncover a few things there for work and for my own personal, you know, sound insanity. But she showed me in the corner of her office, there were some old books from the old RKO library, which Paramount engulfed. And there were these old books with like typing on like parchment. I mean, it was like these really old logs. And I'm flipping through it and I find some sound effects for King Kong. I was like, what are they? Oh, those are masters for King Kong. And some of them hadn't even been transferred to digital yet. They were still on either mag film or on optical film. So I like, can you do me a favor and transfer all this stuff? So I got it. And I'm looking through the logs, and there was a note for a sound effect that said scorpion fight. And I remembered that was a scene that was cut from the 1931 King Kong. He went down into the bug pit and fought a giant scorpion. And they had started working on it, but they abandoned the sequence. I can't remember why. Either it was too expensive or time constraints or whatever, but they abandoned it. Peter Jackson recreated it for the DVD of the new King Kong that he did several years ago. And the sound guys were working with me on another show. They'd moved on to another show. They'd finished the dub like a few weeks earlier. And they were working on the DVD and starting another film at the same time. And I found all this stuff, and I asked Maureen, have the guys asked about this? And they said, no, it's just been sitting here. So I transferred it all and I listened to it. And one of the guys was coming by, Ethan Vanderen, was there, and I called him in my office and said, I want you to listen to something. And I played him the scorpion sounds that were made for the original King Kong that he had just remade for the new version. And he the expression on his face was priceless. It was like, thanks. Can you send those to me about 3 months ago, please? But sometimes you fall into these things and you find the trail, and you weren't even really looking for them. But they didn't. I don't know why they didn't even try to look for the new. I mean, maybe they didn't have the time or anything like that. But it's interesting how this stuff. Sometimes this stuff just finds you. You put it out there that you're looking for stuff, and you start getting calls. I'm at that point with the museum. I'm getting calls that I have an old moviola I'm just going to get rid of. Do you want it for the museum? And I've trained myself to just say yes to
That's
everything.
Right.
Just
yes.
Yes, I do. Where the hell am I going to put this? Okay, thank you. So. Well,
you have to say, you need to say yes, because the opportunity may not come up again.
No, that's right. And I've lost stuff too, because my mom passed away a few months ago. And just dealing with all of that has the museum some of the stuff had to be put on hold. And I lost a couple opportunities. I'm like, punishing myself, because there were a couple things that I really wanted that I couldn't follow up because I had this family crisis. So yeah, you got to be diligent. You got to keep up with this stuff. And I've got storage units all over town, and one in Berkeley now too, with stuff for the museum. But great stuff. It'll be great once we get it all in one place.
What has been the greatest find? The greatest find thus far that you're willing to reveal?
Well, the one we're going to talk about very soon was pretty amazing. I mean, this is a legendary collection, and I'm just amazed that we were able to secure. But beyond that, I think it was very sweet when Lisa Varney gave us her father's Oscars, pledged them to us, one of which we have. We're getting the other one. Gosh, I mean, it's just every time. I'm just such a geek about this stuff, to get the library and hold it in your hands and go through all the sounds. Like, Lisa Udall has given us Dave's library, and he every Halloween I think about him, because he did all of the those John Carpenter films like The Thing and Christine, and all those wonderful films with all these great scary sounds. The Thing in particular, it runs every Halloween, and just all those transformation sounds and all the
everything's been running this past weekend.
Yeah.
Since we are just a few days from Halloween.
Yeah. I think my first time was last year, and around the same.
It was around, yeah.
It
was around, yes.
Well, there you go.
But there's something about Steve,
it's a good sound effect.
Steve and Halloween.
It's a good sound effects month, I think.
Well, it is, and some of the most recognizable sound effects over history started or the genesis was for a film
Yeah.
associated with horror.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, we've heard previous ones on the show that were, stemmed right out of the Universal horror films.
That's right. Yeah, we've talked about, the thunder from Frankenstein, or, the various screams, Fay Wray's screams from King Kong. And yeah, those are the ones that are remembered. Sure, you put some really intense emotional context behind something, you're going to remember it.
Yeah. And the fact that these things also, one of the great things about sound is that with these sound libraries that so many, and regular listeners, they have heard Tim Hoganacker, they've heard a couple of the other guys from Formosa here.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about creating their own sound libraries, and they will go back and they will use that as their source.
It's the lifeblood of any good sound company. Your library is your palette, and you're always building it. You're always creating it. And it's like a timeline, too, of your work. You can go down it and see all the films you've done. And it helps orient you. You can see how far you've gone, and you can, if you think of a sound from a film, you know generally where it is on the shelf. But yeah, libraries are like that distinguishes you from everyone else. And,
I mean, I love hearing, sound guys talk about going out with a boom and just recording sounds of nature, sounds of storms, tornadoes, hurricanes.
It's you've made me think of something that I actually have to play. One of the things that we're always collecting sounds, even if we don't have a need for it right at that moment. And there's a fun story with Richard Anderson, who called in the first time I was on the show.
Yeah.
Great Oscar-winning sound editor, Richard Anderson, and his partner Steve Flick, who is also a Oscar winner now for RoboCop. When they were partners, they were working on Poltergeist, the first Poltergeist. And they stayed at some cheap motel somewhere, and it was raining, and it was next to a highway. And
sounds like the Bates Motel to me.
yeah, they were exactly. Actually, it wasn't even Poltergeist they were working on; it was something earlier. But Richard went and stuck a mic out the door of the motel. Pam, why don't you cue up number 17, please? While I'm telling
this
story.
is a real collaborative effort here today.
Pam in the booth is helping us out. But Richard wanted to record the rain, but there was a highway off in the distance too, and Steve was like, why are you recording this? It's not one thing, it's a couple things. How are we going to use this? Because sound people are so insistent that everything be separate so you can control the levels of everything. And this was a highway with rain, a light rain. And Richard just went and recorded it just for the sake of having it in the library. But not long later, they get Poltergeist, and the last shot in the film is when they check into a motel and shove the TV out and close the door, and the camera pulls back, and there's rain, and there's a distant highway. So, yeah, you're going to use this stuff. It's going to come in handy.
And this sounds so fantastic.
Yeah. And it was just because it was their kind of thing. So there you go. I mean, that's the lesson. Is always be recording. Always build your library. And nowadays, there's no excuse. You can go and buy a little digital recorder for a couple $100 and just gather sounds and build your library.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Olympus. I have an Olympus Digital, and then I've got my Zoom H4n.
Yeah, Zooms are great. Tascam has a great one. Yeah.
My H4n, I swear by that. I love it, and I actually have run into a couple directors, and I may have mentioned this on a prior show. The director of The Eagle Huntress, a documentary a couple years ago. They had to climb up into the mountains in Mongolia as, the young eagle huntress had to get a baby eaglet.
Oh, wow.
From a nest.
Yeah.
And they wanted to include this whole process where she's climbing down the cliff. She's up there with her dad. She's climbing down this rocky cliff, to get this little eaglet out of the nest. Well, director is up there filming, but he can't lug everything up there.
Yeah.
So in order to capture the sounds, he had his H4n, and he's hanging off the side of the cliff with his arm down with the H4n. That sound is what's in the documentary.
Now you can do that. Now you can do that because you've got a small enough recorder. Back in the day, you couldn't do that. Jimmy McDonald, who was the Disney sound effects genius for many years, did the voice of Mickey Mouse after Walt gave it up. he had to fake a lot of those old true life adventure sound effects, all the nature things. There's the brilliant story about the penguins, the jackass penguins. That was actually the breed. That was actually the name. For years, I thought Jimmy was like just being surly. He was talking about these jackass penguins he had to make the voice of. No, that's what they're called. But he performed it himself. He just did that vocal.
Because he didn't have the access.
It was all MOS. It was all without sound. So, yeah, he had to fake all that. And all those old true life adventures is mostly just.
I'm sorry, you're breaking my heart because I really love all those old Disney true life adventures.
But it was perfect. He did them so perfectly that we never knew. We had no clue. It was just, and that's the thing about our craft is if we do it right, you shouldn't question it. You just believe it.
And now you're here dashing all my childhood memories. Steve.
Well, I'm sure there were a couple sounds that were real. Maybe.
Fine. Well, talking about sounds here, because it is Halloween week.
Right.
You brought along a few sounds
I did.
that might be.
Well, we were talking about Poltergeist. Let's
Yeah.
talk about. This is a great example. This has been in my little lecture palette for a while, so some of your fans might have heard this. But there's a scene in Poltergeist, the first Poltergeist, which my pals Richard Anderson and Steve Flick were nominated for an Oscar. The scene where the investigators come to the house and one of them's bragging about how he took a time-lapse picture of a toy that like moved across the table over 7 hours. And Craig Nelson's like, yeah. And then he opens up the door and all these toys are flying around the room. That sequence was an ILM shot, an optical printed wonderful shot of all these toys flying around. So there's no sound that existed. So they had to come up with a sound of all these toys flying around the room. And what they did was pretty neat. Pam, if you want to cue up 11, and then we're going to go through 11 and 15. They would take these toys into a room and put up 2 stereo mics, and they wearing socks or something soft that you can't hear their footsteps. They would walk these toys in a circle in the room so that you got this stereo spatiality of the recording. And this is a sort of a squeak toy kind of thing. And they would just sort of walk it around the room. For those of you listening in stereo, you can hear there's a little space on it. And they did this with a bunch of different toys. They did that with a squeak toy. There's sort of a music box thing that they... And they just built up this library of all these toys that they moved around in this space. There's this wind-up clattery toy boy. They found all these wonderful toys that made these sounds that were very distinctive, so they wouldn't step on each other. They all had their own. This is a wind-up toy boat that they just wound up and sort of walked it around the room. And then they got a bunch of other things. There was an evil laughter in the background. That's the late, great Warren Hamilton, who was one of our sound editors for many years. He was a great guy. Worked on so many films with us, and he had such a distinctive voice. So we put Warren in that. Now this one, hold on this one for a second, Pam, the number 15. This requires a story. One of the things that's really fun is, and it's an ILM optical special effect thing, where a record comes up and it's like spinning in the air and this compass comes down and sets on the record and you actually hear it play for a few seconds. That's something that took a lot of thought what they were going to do. So Alan Howarth, who is a brilliant sound designer and music composer, helped with that one. He created something called the Ghostophone. We had
Okay.
I say we because I was with these guys for so long. Actually, I didn't work on it, but I archived all these stories and everything. So I feel like I was part of it, but I wasn't. But Jerry Goldsmith recorded "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" with a chorus. He had a bunch of kids come in and sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" with the orchestra, and they recorded that and they put it on a record. They made like an acetate. And then Alan got the record and he made this device with a turntable. It was some like handcrafted thing with it was like a sewing needle and a big paper cup and a handle that would set down on the thing. So you got this sort of acoustic playback of the record, not an amplified electronic playback, but just an acoustic playback. And they did several recordings of this. It took forever to do because it kept skipping. They kept trying to figure out how to. And this record had "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" over and over and over, so they could do multiple takes. So go ahead and play 15, Pam. This is from that session.
Acoustic phonograph.
It took forever to get it without skipping, to get one complete take. Can you imagine how frustrating it was?
Oh my God.
Whoops. And ultimately, you don't even hear it all in the film. You just hear a little bit of it.
Okay, this is creepy.
Yeah, I know, isn't it?
This is creepy.
Oh, damn. So close. Anyway, that's good, Pam.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, so that's how they did that. And they mixed all these together and, cut them. One of the toys that flies around in the room is a toy TIE fighter from Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And Richard went and got the sound from Ben, the elephant
well, of
roar.
course.
And so that you hear that for a brief moment when it goes by. But yeah, that's one of the fun sequences from that film that they.
Well, I think it's only fair, since we're at the halfway point of the show, that
Oh, do we want to do the thing?
Well, we're going to just do
Okay.
one.
One of them's been here before.
Well, and that's why.
Yeah, our old friend. There's
our
there it is.
Our old friend.
She has just uncovered, for those of you without picture, she's just uncovered an Oscar.
And for those of you that are not watching the Facebook live stream on adrenalineradio.com.
Why the hell not? That's
why. But don't worry. We're doing 2-camera shoot today, so you'll have a video of this so you can see it. But he's been here before.
He has. He's an old friend.
He's an old friend.
Yeah.
I think it's only fair that
Yeah.
we let him participate a
Absolutely. Yeah, let him out.
And he's so beautiful and shiny.
Yeah, that's Bill Varney's Oscar for Best Sound, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which his daughter Lisa very, very sweetly pledged to the museum. And we're getting Bill's other one, too, Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, he's with us today to say hello.
Yeah, and speaking of Raiders of the Lost Ark,
yes.
One of your sounds.
Oh, do I have?
You have alien transmission whispers
here. That's a
here.
story. Yeah, let me tell you that story.
Because I think this is just so fun because it ties Ben Burt and it ties everybody together.
It does. Well, Ben worked briefly on the first Alien movie, the Ridley Scott Alien, and he made a bunch of sounds. Some that are still in the show, but most of them got cut. The one sequence that I think it's on one of the special features. I think they restored it or something. I don't quite know. But there was a scene where they actually listened to the transmission from the alien ship, and it got cut from the film. But Ben made a sound for it. And it was this creepy, sort of hissy, sort of whispering sound. And it got cut from the film. So Ben sort of kept it in the library. And he ended up using it later for Raiders of the Lost Ark as one of the voices of the ghosts coming out of the Ark. Because it had this sort of creepy... Go ahead and play it. It's, what is it? It's
18.
18, yeah. Play a little bit of this. It's just this creepy kind of... almost vocal, but not really, and it's got information in it. But if you remember Raiders, you can remember that. One of the ghosts coming out of the Ark. Yeah,
I mean that's one of the great things. The sounds are so distinctive.
Yeah,
and they're touchstones, and much as music, it's a touchstone. I mean, you talk about the soundtrack of your life. Mm-hmm. Which everybody's going to get to experience this Friday with Bohemian Rhapsody, by the way.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Which I'm
a big Queen fan. So
I am gaga over this film, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It is truly a cinematic experience. But I think about, the sound. Music is a soundtrack of your life. These sound effects are as much a soundtrack of our lives as music is.
Well, and a lot of these sounds, some of them are very musical too.
Yeah.
Like I had played last time I was here, or one of the last times I was here, some Jimmy McDonald percussion sounds that he did for Disney, he actually wrote them out like a musical composition with several performers, and they would count down and do that. There's another sound here that sort of leads into that. The 1951 film The Man in the White Suit with Alec Guinness. It's a story about this this chemist who comes up with this indestructible cloth, and he makes a suit out of it and bakes it. He almost takes down the entire textile industry because everyone goes nuts. And if they're only going to need one more suit, we're out of business. But the chemical apparatus that he creates to make this fabric had this wonderful sound to it, all these glugs and gurgles. And I tracked down the woman who made these sounds. She did not get a credit on the film. Yeah, her name was Mary Haberfield. And she was a brilliant sound editor. She worked on many, many shows, sometimes credited, a lot of times not. But she made this wonderful composition. She recorded these drip sounds by like hitting these pieces of brass on her palm, and it sounded just like a drip sound. She forced liquid through different drains to make different, tuned drain sounds, and then she manipulated the tape, and then she cut them all together at sort of 4/4 beat. To make this whenever you saw the thing, the chemical apparatus working, you'd hear this wonderful sound. Go ahead and play cue number 1, Pam. This is sort of a long version of what it sounded like.
Oh, that is very.
Isn't that brilliant?
Very musical.
And it the first time you see it, there's this dialogue going back. He's hiding because he's not supposed to be there. And all the company officials are like looking at this thing, what the hell is this? Oh, I don't know. And they have this sort of internal argument trying to figure out what it is. And this is going through the entire scene. And so you listen to it, and it's completely different every measure. The drips are different, and the tones are different, and then it changes rhythm sometimes. And it's just this wonderful composition that Mary Haberfield made, just edited either on 1/4-inch tape or on film. When you think that each little sound, each drip, each drain sound was just one piece of film that she cut together into this pattern. See, it's evolving again. And when I was a kid, I saw this film for the first time, and I was just listening to this thing, and that's just brilliant. I've snuck this sound into a couple films I've worked on.
I think it's cool.
Well, Joe Dante, who is a big film fan, he loves to put in little references. Oh, there it goes again.
Yeah.
But he loves the history of these things, and when there's an evil laboratory in one of his films, like in Gremlins 2 and Looney Tunes Back in Action, we snuck this in there.
Snuck it in.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's great.
Well, let me tell you, when the film came out, the studio released a pop single, produced by some guy named George Martin.
Yes.
Whatever happened to him?
Whatever happened to him? I don't know.
I think he worked with some little group of 4 guys. But
Yeah.
he got together with his musician Jack Parnell, and they produced the White Suit Samba. You got to understand, this is 1951. This is popular music at the time. So Pam, at number 2, this is just a little sample. They wrote this little sort of thing and incorporated some of Mary Haberfield's sounds in it. So it's just this little silly, single, just a one-off, like they would do to promote the film. It sounds like the sounds are just tacked on, but at the end it gets kind of interesting. Here we go, this gets good. The tuba works well. So you were talking about sound effects being music. There's a real good example.
Well, and I'm listening to that, and it's okay. We've got the tuba coming in there. There's a xylophone in there, so that it can really work with the effects that she created.
And I was thrilled to actually find out her name and how she did it. That was a couple hours at the Academy Library. I managed to find one copy of the program that was given out at the premiere of the film back in 1951.
And it was in there.
It was in the Academy Library, and there was this one little paragraph about the sound effects. Because it was such a star of the film, they had to write about it. Mm-hmm. And I was so grateful to find that little snippet of information.
Okay, well, here's a sound effect that I need you to research for me.
Oh, boy, here it comes.
From Desk Set with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy.
Wow, okay.
The computer Emirac. Incredible sound effects.
I'm not familiar. I'll have to look that up.
Okay, you don't know the movie?
No, sorry.
Oh. Classic. I'm sorry, classic film listeners. I am so sorry. I did not properly vet him on Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, I'm a fan of theirs.
You haven't,
and I'm sure I've seen it. I just don't remember.
That movie's great with Joan Blondell, Dina Merrill. Oh, it's fabulous.
I'll put it on my list.
It is a must see.
Okay.
It takes place around Christmas, so it's a good Christmas movie.
Well, there you go. Timing is good.
But I want to know. I want to know the history of the sounds that were created for Emirac the computer.
Okay.
That's your mission.
I'm on it.
Yeah, I want that.
Okay.
But I don't know. We have somebody here that's.
Do we want to do that? Okay.
He seems very lonely.
Well, Bill Varney's Oscar there needs a partner. Okay, I'll tell you the story.
I don't know. He's
Okay.
We have this.
It's a long involved. I mean, this is one of the main reasons I'm here. Is this great acquisition for the Sound Museum, and that's only one part of it right there. There were 3 guys. When the term sound designer was formed, there were 3 guys back in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, that epitomized that term. There was Ben Burt, who we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
There's Walter Murch, who worked a lot with Francis Coppola, doing films like The Conversation and Apocalypse Now. And there was a guy named Alan Splet. Alan Splet worked with David Lynch quite often. In fact, they collaborated on one of their first big projects, which was Eraserhead, which was a collection of fantastic, creepy sounds on the soundtrack. There was no real music per se. It was this wonderful, eerie, crazy sound that Alan created with David. And they also did Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Dune. Amazing work. He was fantastic at creating emotion in sound. The backgrounds, like the industrial sort of heartbeats and things of Elephant Man.
Sound in Dune is fantastic.
Oh yeah, Dune is brilliant.
The original Dune, people.
Yeah. The first version, yeah.
The real one.
That David Lynch almost had his name taken off. It was pretty incredible. But Alan amassed this huge, amazing library of all these wonderful creations. He passed away about almost 20 years ago. And his partner, his widow, Anne Krober, is a very dear friend of mine. And when I started this museum project, I wanted to get her involved. And I've been talking to her for the last several years. We'd love to get Alan's collection in the library. Would you consider that? And she'd been thinking about it for a while. Well, just in the last few weeks, literally last week, I was up there to see her. She's had to move. She's had to relocate, and she was consolidating her stuff. And she offered me the library to take to the museum. And I said, you're still the owner of this. We're just going to be custodians of it and keep it in the library and restore it and digitize it. And she said, okay. So we made an agreement, and I took a road trip to Berkeley, and most of it is in storage in Berkeley, but we're going to bring it down for the museum when we're ready. But I've got a few tapes of it here. Oh, I just crapped out. I can't hear myself anymore.
You can't hear yourself?
Okay. Oh.
Can you hear yourself now?
There I am. Okay. I guess I'll put the other. I'm sorry. I just all of a sudden I went dead for a second.
He's
but anyway.
playing with his headsets, people.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Anyway, these are a few tapes from. There are over 3,000 tapes in this.
Wow.
This is tape 2346, which is a Michael Jackson tape. I'm not sure what's on this. It could be something very interesting. I literally just acquired all this stuff, so I don't know what's on a lot of it.
Niagara Master.
Yeah, he worked on Thriller apparently, so. I don't know. We'll see. But I went up to see Anne, and we boxed up all the tapes, and we put them in storage, and I'm going to be taking them down to the lab and digitizing them and making them accessible. But then she stunned me when I was up there, and she offered me... Go ahead.
Okay.
She offered me, and I took, Alan's Oscar for The Black Stallion. That's a special achievement Oscar that Alan won for sound editing on The Black Stallion. And I was just blown away. it's Bill's Oscar has a friend now.
That's right.
But I was not expecting it. I didn't push her or anything, but she offered that, and it's going to have a place of honor in the museum on display. And this Oscar has a bit of notoriety attached to it. And
yes,
let's tell the story.
Let's tell the story about
Yeah.
Mr. Alan Splet.
Well, it was the
Oscar.
It was the 1979 Academy Awards, and it was a Special Achievement Award. So Alan knew he was getting it. But for one reason or another, he decided he wasn't going to come to Hollywood to accept it. He was either working. I think he might have been in London at the time. He was working, and he would have lost several days, even though the studio offered to send a plane and send him by Concorde to pick it up. And he said no, he didn't want it. He ran from publicity. He was a real modest guy and just stayed out of the limelight, but it chased him down. Anyway, come the night of the Oscars, Johnny Carson announced that he was going to win I've got a sound clip of it if you want to play number 20, Pam. This is Johnny Carson.
Before the presentation of the next award, which is in the category of sound, I'd like to tell you that the Board of Governors has voted a Special Achievement Award for sound effects editing of the Black Stallion to Mr. Alan Splet.
Anyway, huge honor. And everyone was, that's brilliant. That's great. But he wasn't there to accept the award. And I think the combination of him not being there and I think Johnny just liked the name Alan Splet. There's something, you talk about humor in words, like, Groucho Marx loved the word duck, and used it and everything. Alan Splet, his name is a sound effect. So I guess Johnny ran with that. And after the sound awards, the actual awards that preceded that little announcement, he came back on. And if you play 21... Pam, this is
Ladies and gentlemen, we just heard from Alan Splet. He missed the off-ramp at the Civic Center. And he's somewhere in Ensenada, but he's on his way here.
For the rest of the
Our
evening,
next presenter.
For the rest, he kept riffing on Alan Splet. He kept giving Alan Splet updates. And, Alan Splet took a wrong turn on the 605, but he's coming. I swear he's coming. And I guess Melvin Douglas won an award that night, and he did not show up. Mm-hmm. So Carson comes back on right after that with this.
It is not Melvin Douglas's fault he's not here tonight. He was in a carpool with Alan Splet.
But he kept going on. It almost every commercial break he would come back with Alan Splet updates. And finally, at the end of the evening, we all know George C. Scott and a couple of other people, weren't there to accept their awards.
Right.
So at the end of the evening, before his closing remarks, he ended with this.
It always happens. First George C. Scott doesn't show, then Marlon Brando, and now Alan Splet.
So this Oscar has a certain amount of notoriety, and we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate that whole story into the museum. I don't know, maybe we'll have the video clip running behind it, but yeah.
Oh, my God. But this is exciting that, for you to have two Oscars, a third one on the way.
Yeah.
It's already committed.
But Alan's library is really the thing.
That's the gem.
There's so much history there and so many wonderful films, all the things he recorded. I remember when I was working on a film, I can't remember what it was, but we needed some wolves. And we called Alan because he had done Never Cry Wolf. Mm-hmm. This is the wonderful picture. With just brilliant sound design. And he said, oh, sure, I'll send you a couple tapes. And like 3 or 4 reel-to-reel tapes like this come, FedEx down of these amazing recordings, very plaintive and scary, and all these different, emotions that he'd built up from these collections of wolves that he'd recorded. Just such a brilliant guy. And I'm just thrilled that he's going to be represented at the library.
I think that's fabulous. Mm-hmm. Fabulous. I'm curious because you talk about digitizing, and a lot of people aren't familiar with DAP. They're not familiar with digital archive preservation. Yeah. So what goes into digitizing these, it's reel-to-reel is one thing, but then you've got mag tapes, optical tapes.
See, that's the thing. It's funny how you say that because it's always changing.
Yeah.
By the time we're ready to finally move with the museum and we have our interactive exhibits and we have our digital library accessible, it'll be a different format. I mean, it changes so quickly. I'm going to have to learn about some of these new format. But the trick is first to just load the effects, just to get them on, some kind of digital media so that you can transfer them over. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just high-res wave files of some kind. Yeah, it's crazy how this keeps changing, but we're gonna have to have a massive digital storage unit of some kind to maintain all this stuff. There's so many different. We've got several sponsors in Tascam and some other companies, and I am overdue to sit down with them and look at the different means. But when I was working at Old Weddington back in the day, I was transferring these quarter-inch tapes constantly for weeks and weeks to just DAT tape first,
Right.
and then to digital audio file. I mean, straight into Pro Tools. I mean, they didn't even exist in a tangible. They just were on a hard drive. There's something very sad about that. There's nothing. There's, tape and film is just so, it's real. It's you're holding it in your hand. So I'm kind of sad that it sort of goes into the ether and you just push a button and you hear it. I want to.
But
something.
important is that you're not destroying or getting rid of the original source.
That's another sore issue. Is so many studios are just tossing the originals. They're just getting rid of them.
Yeah.
So that was another impetus for the museum. Another reason we save all this stuff.
time is of the essence. I mean, you take a look over at Culver Studios is a perfect example.
Oh, sure.
And I mean, it's just getting decimated and ripped to the ground. All these grand old sound stages there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Universal too. They just the old Phantom stage is gone. They had to rebuild that.
And a lot of what gets lost to make room for things are these great archival libraries.
Sure.
It's
absolutely.
It's sad. That's and I know we talked about this before. I'm a member of Broadcast Pioneers, and their big thing, Broadcast Pioneers in Philadelphia, their big thing is preserving radio and television history out of Philadelphia. And tons of archival stuff in my dad's house. And it's like, okay, people, here it is. Let's digitally preserve all of this because it's stuff going back to, into the 1920s, 1930s. And then film that is crispy, shall we say.
It's scary. Sometimes you can get one playback out of it before it has to be retired. These tapes, we've had to bake tapes to get them to play because we found that the adhesive gets sticky and bleeds into the magnetic portion, and so it can't get past the recording head. You literally have to bake it. We actually made a proprietary box with an industrial hairdryer to just heat them up so that you could do it. Yeah.
New uses for hair dryers.
Yeah. Well, some people actually stuck them in ovens and forgot about them and melted the reel and ruined the tape. So we were trying to think of something that wouldn't be destructive but could still heat it up to the amount of the heat that we need. So we thought hair dryers would be a way to go, and it works really well.
That's that goes with my great discovery I found on the internet last week about a new use for vodka. Mold.
Oh yeah?
It kills mold.
Oh, that's good to know.
Isn't that good to know?
I mean, I've got plenty on hand already, so
it's amazing the things that you
new
learn.
Excuse to have to buy vodka. I don't have to be, don't have to rationalize it that way.
No, vodka cannot, however, be used for cleaning Oscars or for anything like that.
Right.
But it's also very good for removing adhesive from spliced tapes.
Yes.
Excellent for that.
Yeah. Any good alcohol-based product.
And for cleaning heads on machines if you don't have any alcohol around.
Right. Absolutely. So should we play some more?
Let's play
sound
some
effects?
more sound
Let's
effects.
See. Any preference there? You have a copy of my log
Well,
there.
let's see.
Oh, let's tell the Alice in Wonderland the story of Tweedledee and Tweedledum there, because that's one of my favorites.
Well, let's do that.
I'm a huge Disney fan.
No,
and,
you think?
Yes,
so
I am.
you all know, he was just there the other day.
I was.
When he leaves the studio today, he's going back to Disneyland.
I'm spending 3 days there just to get my act together and regroup.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky because that Steve is here today because he would be,
My park time. We're cutting into my park time.
we're cutting into his park time, people.
It's okay.
Well, so let's talk about Tweedledum and
Well,
Tweedledee.
this goes back to when I was at Weddington and I was working with Mark Mangini on Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. And I think Mark knew that my I was a bit obsessive with Disney and Disney sound and
You
knew
think?
a lot about Jimmy Mill. I think he figured it out, especially if he didn't before, he certainly did at this moment. We had an opportunity to go to Disney and raid the library of all of Jimmy McDonald's sound effects. And the copy we had, we couldn't find all the logs. So and it was chronologically arranged like most libraries were. So we sort of went to an early section because we wanted some of those early comic sounds from the late 40s, early 50s of some of those wonderful sounds, that those films that had those great comic sounds that Jimmy made. And he grabbed a bunch of tapes and I grabbed a bunch of tapes. And he had a station that had external speakers so we could hear everything he played. I had headphones in a different corner of the room. And he put on a tape and started listening, and all of a sudden he played a bulb horn. This is cue number 28, Pam. It's just a standard, like you'd have on bicycles. You'd squeeze the bulb and it would make a horn sound. And this is that sound. It's just a high-end, honk. I heard it right away, and I said, "Oh, that's Tweedledum." And Mark was like, "What do you mean?" That's Tweedledum from Alice in Wonderland. If you go ahead a cue or two, I'll bet you it'll be one octave lower. And that'll be Tweedledee. And sure enough it was. And Mark gave me this look like, you're insane. But, and there's a cue 30 is both of them together, going back and forth. Yeah. I actually use this for my alert sound on my phone.
Okay. All right.
But it's always had a warm place in my heart for the Disney sound effects.
Well, and you brought a couple more of your favorite Disney sound effects today too.
Oh, did I? Let's see. What do I have?
I think.
yeah.
I think you did.
When I was working on a film for Disney, it was actually a film that's no longer there. It was a Disney California Adventure. It was a Whoopi Goldberg film about the history of California, and there was a train in the film. And I wanted to record some new train stuff. Really, I wanted to just go backstage at the park. So I said, "Hey, can we go to Disneyland to record the train?" And the guy said, "Oh, yeah, we'll set that up for you." So we went backstage at Disneyland to record the train for a day. That was a great day. But we recorded the horns, the whistles of all the different trains. Which one first? If you 25 first, Pam. This is one of the trains of Disneyland. They have these wonderful. You recognize this immediately, from the Disneyland train. Kids get excited when they hear this because they get a tour of the entire park. So
I get excited because it means I can get on and I don't have to walk.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll do that in the midday. I'll just ride the train around over and over.
My mother loved.
Yeah.
I took her to Disneyland when she was out here once, and back in the 80s, and she loved the train.
Yeah.
She was happy to sit on that train and ride the train for a couple hours.
No,
anybody that knew my mother,
I'm going to do it tonight.
I was happy at that moment.
I'm going to get a drink, and I'm going to sit on the train and just ride it around a couple times and just decompress tonight. I'm looking forward to that. But there's something else interesting that I did not know from that day that we went to record the train. The roundhouse that is backstage, it's near Harbor Boulevard. It's on the side of the park there, just between, right where the 5 and Harbor Boulevard meet. Mm-hmm. That corner of the park is where the roundhouse is, where all the trains are stored at night. And it's also where the monorail lives at night. And that big building, they mounted a train whistle on that building. It's actually mounted on. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. It's fascinating. I don't know if it's still there, but it was when we did this. It's this big old train whistle that's mounted on the building. And I said, "Oh, can we record that?" And they said, "Oh, sure." So that's if you play number 24. This is the roundhouse whistle at the Disneyland Hotel backstage. Wonderful. It almost
Sounds like the steamboat whistle.
It sounds kind of like the steamboat whistle. It's got a different timbre.
Yeah.
This one sounds like the work whistle at the Flintstones. You know, the day of work is over.
It's not quite as sharp.
Kind of, but it's got that sort of feel to it. But in the film that we did, the California Adventure film, History of California, this is actually the whistle we used for the train.
Oh.
Because it just had a neat sound to it.
It's a great. It's a really good sound.
I had no idea it was there. And if we did not have that sort of backstage privilege to go there, I would not have known about it.
Will you be exerting any backstage privileges while you're there today?
So we also have to play tonight. Here's another sound effect that I like. I don't have much backstory on it, but it's a wonderful sort of textured kind of sound that Jimmy McDonald made. This is from Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Key number 27. This is a good Halloween sound. This is the Banshee from Darby O'Gill. And it's a woman's vocal with a little bit of vibraphone. It was probably recorded in their echo chamber. They had the wonderful echo chamber at Disney that they would actually, the talent would actually go inside it
to record.
and record it. Yeah, and we don't do it that way anymore because we like to control the amount. You know, we'll do it electronically, but back then they just would record them in the echo chamber. So that's probably where.
So you got the echo at that moment.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Well, my favorite. We have two perfect ones.
Oh boy.
Two perfect ones for this show.
What's that?
Before because we have a few minutes left in the show.
Oh right, okay.
So two that fit this week of Halloween perfectly, I think. We have the Frankenstein, the Strickfaden.
Oh yeah, that.
And of course.
Yeah.
A witch.
Oh, we have the witch. Well, let's play the witch really quick because that's just sort of a sound effect and it's the same effect several times, Pam. So after one, we can just kill it. But cue 31. This is the witch. It was recorded originally for Snow White. This is the great scream. That woke you up. Yeah. It's just the same one over and over. They used to archive things that way. But that's the great death cry of the witch from Snow White. And it was also used again in Sleeping Beauty when Maleficent got it at the end. And she was a dragon at that point, but she still let out the scream, which I thought was interesting as a kid.
Well,
it's her spirit screaming.
And of course we actually we threw it out there because sound goddess Paula Fairfield, mother of dragons.
Good.
She's laid up now with an
Paula.
injury.
Poor Paula.
So, I know Paul listens once in a while, so anytime you want to come on the show, Paula, you're more than welcome. I even had messaged her before the show and said, "Hey, Steve's here. If you're bored,
call in,
and you want to talk sound, you're free to call in." But mentioning dragons, it always makes me think of Paula, the mother of dragons. She is the one that created the sound of dragons for Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Strickfaden. Frankenstein, 1931. A guy named Ken Strickfaden built these wonderful props, the Jacob's ladders and all the electrical props. He actually built those for Frankenstein at Universal. And they were these brilliant props. I've seen them several times and actually used them a couple times to record. This is an earlier recording, though. This isn't my recording of it. But they're still in service. They're still around. I think they're in Texas right now. I'm not sure exactly where they are. But for many years, they were in a warehouse in Hollywood, and you could rent them. They were in Young Frankenstein. They used the same props, the original props. So they even have a little credit for it at the beginning of the film. We'd like to thank Kenneth Strickfaden for the use of the Frankenstein props. Brilliant things, and you'd plug them in and you'd do this wonderful thing, and they made these wonderful electrical sounds. And Richard and Steve and Mark Mangini went to record them for, I think, Poltergeist, for all the electrical discharges. And this is a variable traveling arc. This is one of them. And I picked this particular recording because if you listen carefully, you can hear them talking. Steve Flick almost bought the farm on this one. in the middle of the take, he decided, oh, this would be a good place to put a microphone, and the guy hit the kill switch immediately because no, that's
been
not
electrocuted.
he would have been fried. He would have been completely fried. But you'll hear Richard's voice. Richard, of course, has to get his little quip in. Brilliant, my pal Richard
Okay,
Anderson.
we're going to start with our first Ken Strickfaden machine here. What's this called?
This is the variable traveling arc. I'll start low and then.
From the top is the. Too close?
Yeah, you want to be real. This thing will kill you. Seriously? Oh, yes. Oh, cute.
Don't do that. We'll have to finish the film by ourselves.
Leave it to Richard to put everything in perspective. But this is such a great electrical kind of, it's your typical
Sci-fi,
classic.
yeah.
That, Frankenstein set the standard for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And this is the prop, and they're in perfect working condition still. And all the different settings, you could get different zaps out of them. But God, we've used this for so many different things.
So many things, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great, staple of the library to have electrical discharges. And the fact that it's this classic, wonderful prop that was made for, such a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Nobody died.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't worry,
Everyone was fine.
Everybody was fine. Oh, they were really going to town with this.
Oh, it was a long session. There was like 10 different props there that they recorded.
Oh my God.
That was just one of them.
Well, unfortunately, as usual.
Yeah, we're not going to go long this time.
We
That's
are
fine.
out of time today. Well, because you have to get to Disneyland.
I do. Otherwise, I'd set another record.
That's okay. We've had two 90-minute shows with you already.
I'm good.
You're the first guest with 90 minutes. The first one
Yeah.
with 3 visits. There will be more.
There we go. Yes, there will be.
There will be
Well,
more.
the museum, we're constantly acquiring things. I love having this platform where I can share it with everyone. I appreciate being asked. But,
Well, I always love it because you don't even tell me, so it's a surprise for me.
Hey, I'm coming with 2 Oscars. How about that?
Yeah, but see, you don't tell me that. It's like,
Yeah.
I have an announcement.
Yeah.
I'm going to be making an announcement. And that's all that he doesn't even tell me. So I get to be just as excited when he gets here and I find out, like, okay, he showed up today and yes, I saw what was going out on the tablescape, but I don't know the stories. I don't know the background. So it's always.
And she still says yes. Come on in.
I always say yes. It's so much fun.
Yeah. I could have tried a new brand of candy bar or something. And she
Oh, stop it. But follow the Hollywood Sound Museum on Facebook.
Yeah.
Go to hollywoodsoundmuseum.org
Yes.
to get updates on there. And as Steve acquires more and has more fun things to say, I know he'll be back.
I hope so. I appreciate being asked. Thank you very
I
much.
love having you here. You're so fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very
and,
much.
And if you weren't, I would tell you that.
I'm sure you will.
So we are out of time today. Next week, I don't even know at this moment who I have next week. All I know is I'm booking into December now with guests. So that excites me.
That's great.
We're booking in December with guests.
Blue skies.
So
That's great.
until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.